In the mid-80s, my mom was a cleaner in Australia. She would clean houses in suburban areas and would sometimes do houses in rural regions. She would leave business cards at the local shops and got most of her business this way, and some through referrals and word of mouth. One day, she got a call from a lady who sounded like she was around 60, asking Mom to clean her old farmhouse. She made a lot of odd demands, and Mom would usually meet clients before taking on new business. In this case, the lady did not want to meet Mom and said she would leave the keys under the front doormat. Mom agreed mainly because the lady was quite obviously wealthy and was offering to pay Mom substantially more than she would reasonably expect. Mom went to the house on Monday morning and said she already felt unnerved by the long driveway. The house was essentially in the middle of a very large and very empty property. She found the keys and started cleaning. About an hour into the clean, she hears the back door shut. Mom was told no one would be at the house, so she immediately felt unsafe. She stood frozen in the kitchen for what she said felt like 3 to 4 minutes, although she said it could have been much longer. There was no other car on the property. She wanted to leave immediately, but had only 2 rooms left to do. Both were bedrooms. She said as the time passed and she heard nothing else, she decided that perhaps it was nothing. Or perhaps something had fallen and it wasn't the door after all. She walked up the hallway and stepped into the bedroom. All over the bed were black and white photos. As Mom got closer, she realized the photos were all of her. Some were taken at our family home, and many others were taken at other houses Mom would clean. Some through windows or over fences. She used the house phone to call the police and immediately drive to the end of the driveway. The lady ended up being investigated but continued to claim that it was a break-in. After some time, the police stopped with their searching and we ended up moving to a new town 4 months later. Every time Mom tells this story, I get serious chills. To the day, my mom thinks the lady had something to do with it. But why? And for what purpose? To give some background information, this event occurred a little over a year ago and I still haven't been able to even begin to get over it. I'm a 22-year-old female. I'm a 22-year-old 5'4" female, and at the time I was 21. My family and I had recently moved to a new town that was a fair amount more rural than the town that we had previously lived in, and our new house was a large ranch-style house with a basement. I was home from college, and my parents had left for a week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with their friends who lived several miles away. Before I continue, I'll give you a quick layout of the house so that you'll be able to imagine the setting a bit more clearly. There were 3 doors which led into the house, one on the front porch, a sliding glass door on the back porch, and another door on the other side of the wall from my bedroom which led into the garage and basement. When you walk out of the bedroom and turn, you can see all the way across the house to the door of my parents' bedroom and the stairs leading up from the basement. It had been a few days since my parents left, and I hadn't had any problems. They had sent me a couple messages on Facebook letting me know that they arrived to their friend's house safely and were having a good time. The day had gone well, and I was sure to check that I'd locked all the doors of the house once the sun started to go down. It was about 11 p.m., and I was doing my nightly routine of laying in bed and messing around on the computer when I suddenly got this sinking feeling of dread. I felt as if I was being watched. It was summer, and we didn't have AC, so I had a large box fan in the window blowing the cool night air into my stiflingly hot room. But once that feeling settled over me, I decided that I should remove the fan and close the window, just in case. Once I removed the fan, shutting and locking the window, and pulling down the curtain, I felt a bit better. However, I still couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I lay back in my bed and tried to continue what I was doing, though I didn't put my headphones back on. After a few minutes, I began to hear something that sounded like light scratching. I sat still in bed, listening to the sound, trying to pinpoint what it was and if I recognized it at all. Our new house, although relatively close in distance to our neighbors, had a fair amount of forest around it, so I thought the scratching may have been an animal or someone's dog that got loose and wanted to come inside. After a few minutes, the scratching stopped and everything returned to silence. So I figured that I was probably right and that it must have been an animal. My relief was short-lived. As soon after the scratching stopped from the other side of the wall, I began to hear slow footsteps descending into the basement. This is when I knew I was completely fucked. There was no way I could get out of the house without walking past the basement stairs. We didn't have a house phone, and at the time, I was in the process of getting a new cell phone because mine was broken beyond repair. I sat there for a few seconds, wondering what the hell I should do. I knew that I would need to get out of the house as soon as possible, and that the more time I wasted, the worse it would be for me. I contemplated popping the screen out of my window and jumping out, but it was far enough off the ground that there was a good chance I would end up getting hurt if I did. Not to mention that if I jumped out the window and hurt myself, I wouldn't be able to run for help, and I would be right next to the door that whoever was in my house had gone in through. So I decided to very carefully and quietly open my door and peek out around the corner. And if the coast was clear, I would make a mad dash for the front door and sprint to my neighbor's house. I very slowly opened my bedroom door, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness of the house before creeping around the corner and looking to see if I was safe to make a run for it. What I saw nearly made me vomit. As my eyes scanned the house, I noticed that something was off. I squinted hard as I looked over the basement stairs and was able to make out the shape of a man. What made it worse? He wasn't just standing at the top of the stairs. He was fucking crawling up them like some kind of nightmare creature. I quickly backed into my room again, shutting and locking the door as quietly as I could. I didn't think he'd seen me, but there was no way that I was going to make a run for it now. My only choice was to pop the screen and jump out the window. As I was unlocking and opening my window, I heard the handle to my bedroom door turn. Once the man realized it was locked, in a sickeningly sweet sing-song voice he cooed, "I know you're in there." Then he started throwing himself at full force against my door. I ripped the screen out of the window and flung myself out. I landed wrong on my right foot and I was sure that I'd hurt my ankle, but at the time I couldn't think of anything other than getting as far away as possible. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my neighbor's house, knocking on their door in a panicked frenzy and ringing the doorbell over and over again. I looked over at my house as I was yelling for my neighbors to let me in, and I swear to fucking God, I could see the man standing at my window, waving at me. My neighbors finally opened the door after what felt like forever, and I managed to explain well enough what was going on for them to let me in and call the police. I stayed with them until the police arrived. The police searched my house and found that the lock to my basement had been picked, and that the door to my bedroom was hanging off the hinges. They weren't able to find the man anywhere, and because I had only seen him for a split second in the dark, I couldn't provide them with a good description of him. Of course, I got into contact with my parents immediately, and they hurried home. The police took my statement and searched the area for the man, but of course they came up with nothing. After this event, my parents and I were sure to add deadbolt locks to the door leading into the basement and to the door leading out of the basement to the rest of the house. They also helped me to pay to get a new phone. What really bothers me about all of this is that nothing was stolen. There wasn't even any evidence that the guy had looked through anything while he'd been in my house. So, psycho who broke into my house knowing that I was home, let's not meet again. I grew up in rural Michigan and rode the bus to school every morning. We lived in a house at the bottom of a hill on a country road. My bus stop, however, was at the top of the hill after you passed my house. The story I'm about to tell you was when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I woke up one morning and got ready for school like I usually did. My bus picked me up around 7 a.m., right when the sun was starting to come up a little, but there were still spots of darkness deep in the woods. I was the only kid who was picked up at my bus stop, so I would stand at the edge of the woods and wait until the bus came. My mom or dad would have to drop me off about 5 minutes before the bus came and hightail it to work in order to make it there by 8. It's not that they felt completely comfortable doing this, but they didn't have many options. We lived in a safe area, or so we thought, and the bus arrived on time 99% of the time, so they weren't too worried that anything would happen to me in the 5 minutes I was left alone. So, standing there, cold as shit, waiting on the bus to come, watching the sun rise slowly in the sky. It's still a little dark out, but yet, bright enough for me to see what's around me. I saw the lights of the bus in the distance, on time, as usual, and it came to a stop right in front of me. My bus driver, Mrs. Teresa, opened the door and said good morning, and gestured for me to hop on. I walked to my seat and put my stuff down, but noticed that the bus wasn't moving yet. Mrs. Teresa still had the door ajar, and she just sat there, leaning slightly out of her seat, staring into the woods. After a good minute or so, we were off and on our way to school after picking up a few more kids. Arriving at school, Mrs. Teresa escorted us in, which is something she never did, and I remember seeing her slip into the office and talking to one of the secretaries. I went through my regular school day and was picked up by my dad by the car rider line as normal. When he picked me up though, he started asking me all kinds of questions. Bus pickup go okay this morning? And did any cars stop or blow the horn at you as you waited? Strange questions that he never asked me before. That next morning, my parents didn't take me to the bus stop. Mom dropped me off at school before going into work at a later time. This continued, alternating a drop-off by mom or dad for the remainder of the school year. At the time, I noticed they changed my bus stop. Years later, I found out why my bus driver went into the school that day, and why my bus stop was relocated. When Mrs. Teresa picked me up that morning, she saw a man standing in the woods behind where I was, just staring at me. She alerted the school secretary, who alerted the transportation office for the school district, and then the police. The police investigated and found some items wrapped up in a t-shirt back in the woods. A hunting knife, a rope, a rag, a washcloth, and tape. The police never found out who that shit belonged to, but my bus driver, my parents, and the police felt certain that whoever it belonged to had the worst intentions for me. I think about this day often and wonder what would have happened to me had my bus driver been a few minutes late, or had she not noticed the man standing in the woods after I boarded the bus. Because of this incident, the school district changed my bus stop to be located right in front of my house. That way, I could stay in my house until the bus pulled up. No more standing by the woods for me. I resumed riding the bus the next school year. Creepy bus stop man? Let's not meet. And thank you to Mrs. Teresa for probably saving my life.